You just bought the Strait of Hormuz, 29 nautical miles at its narrowest point, a navigable channel of 4 miles, 2 lanes of traffic, inbound and outbound, with a buffer zone between them. Every day, 138 ships pass through those 4 miles. On those ships, 20 million barrels of oil. 1 in 5 barrels consumed anywhere on Earth, every single day. The numbers compound. Nearly 34% of all crude oil traded by sea passes through your strait, more than any other choke point on Earth. Qatar ships 93% of its LNG exports through here. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Bahrain, none of them have a meaningful way to export oil without you. Iraq's entire southern production, 3.4 million barrels a day before the current conflict, has no exit except this passage. Kuwait has no pipeline alternative. Qatar cannot move its gas any other way. There are bypass options, technically. Saudi Arabia has its east-west pipeline, and the UAE has the AD-COP line to Fujairah. Together, at maximum utilization, they can move somewhere between 3.5 and 5.5 million barrels a day. That covers roughly a quarter of normal flow. For 5 of the major exporting countries, the coverage is 0. You own the northern shore and the islands in the middle. The mandatory routing lanes run along your coastline. You are the one country that can, in theory, close this passage. 138 ships a day, 20 million barrels, 4 miles of water. So, how much are you collecting? Nothing. In the 40 years since the Islamic Republic established its current borders along that northern shore, 138 ships a day, roughly 50,000 transits a year, have passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Not one of them paid you a transit fee. International maritime law does not allow it. Straits used for international navigation carry the right of transit passage. Coastal states cannot suspend it, cannot charge for it, cannot require prior authorization. The legal architecture of the global ocean says those 138 ships owe you nothing, but someone has been collecting money from them for 40 years. Just not you. Every one of those tankers carries war risk insurance, a separate layer of coverage for vessels operating near a volatile state with a history of seizing ships, mining shipping lanes, and launching drones at passing vessels. The London market, centered on Lloyd's of London, writes an estimated 70 to 80% of global marine war risk insurance. Its syndicates have been pricing Hormuz into their models since the 1980s. In peacetime, that pricing runs at roughly 0.025% of the vessel's hull value per transit. On a tanker worth $150 million, that is about $37,500. Not dramatic per voyage. But multiply it across thousands of vessels annually, and the London market pulls steady, quiet revenue from the risk profile you maintain simply by existing on that shore. And when you remind the world you could close the strait, a speech, a military exercise, a seizure, the premium moves immediately. In 2019, after Iran seized a British tanker, war risk premiums spiked from that 0.025% baseline to between 0.15 and 0.25%. In days. Without a single transit being blocked. You generated the risk. London priced it. London collected. You have a weapon, though. You can actually close the strait. What happens then? Here's what happens when you threaten to close the strait. London prices it immediately, not after a disruption, not after a ship is seized. The moment the threat is credible. A military exercise, a statement from a senior official, a drone flying close to a tanker. The war risk market reprices. Every underwriter with exposure to Gulf transits recalculates. Premiums move within hours. On February 28, 2026, when coordinated US and Israeli strikes hit Iran, the marine war risk market repriced before the IRGC Navy had blocked a single commercial vessel. Within 48 hours, war risk premiums surged 340%. Lloyd's Joint War Committee redesignated the entire Arabian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Oman as an active conflict zone, the most expansive Gulf listing since the committee's establishment. Lloyd's syndicates assembled a purpose-built consortium with $400 million in aggregate capacity, structured specifically for Hormuz transit coverage. Hull war cover for a standard transit reached 1% of vessel value. For tankers with US, UK, or Israeli ownership links, vessels underwriters began calling missile magnets. The rate reached 5%. A VLCC worth $138 million was attracting quotes of $10 to $14 million per voyage, according to Lloyd's list. That is the financial structure of your weapon. Every threat, every seizure, Every military demonstration, Lloyd's writes another policy. The risk you generate becomes a product. The product gets sold. The revenue flows to London. You provide the instability for free. The market charges for coverage against it. Lloyd's pulls the revenue, yes. But the ship owners don't absorb it. They pass the war risk surcharge into freight rates. The refiners pass it into wholesale prices. The wholesalers pass it to the distributors. And eventually, the person filling up their Honda Civic in Osaka pays a few extra cents per liter for a geopolitical premium they have never heard of. London prints the policy. The global commuter pays it. But threatening and closing are different things. What happens when you actually close the strait? 80% of your own oil exports go through the same 4 miles. Iran has one pipeline that bypasses the strait, the Gore-Jask line, built specifically to reduce dependence on Hormuz, running 1,000 kilometers from the Gulf Coast to a terminal on the Gulf of Oman. Design capacity, 1 million barrels per day. The terminal infrastructure remains incomplete. Actual throughput, a fraction of design. When you close Hormuz, you close it for yourself. This is not a theoretical problem. On February 28, 2026, Iran effectively shut down commercial traffic through the strait. The result was not leverage. It was mutual destruction, distributed unevenly. Gulf crude exports fell 49% in March 2026 compared to February, from 16.58 million barrels per day to 8.44 million. Saudi Arabia's exports dropped to 4.4 million barrels per day. Iraq, which had been exporting 3.4 million barrels a day through Basra, fell to 561,000 barrels per day. Kuwait suspended exports almost entirely, and Iran lost its primary export route the moment the closure began. Saudi Arabia found a valve. Its east-west pipeline, the Petroline, 745 miles from Gulf oil fields to the Red Sea port of Yanbu, doubled its throughput in the first 9 days of March, from 1.1 million to 2.2 million barrels per day. By late March, Saudi Arabia had pushed the pipeline to its full operating capacity of 7 million barrels per day. The Petroline solved the volume problem. It did not fully solve the cost problem. Yanbu sits on the Red Sea, where Houthi drone and missile activity had already been driving its own war risk surcharges since 2024. Redirecting 7 million barrels a day from the Gulf to the Red Sea moved the oil, but moved it into a second elevated insurance zone. The bypass was real. The friction was real, too. The United States imposed a naval blockade on Iranian ports on April 13th. Iran was now locked out of both its primary maritime route and its port access simultaneously. The weapon worked exactly as designed. The problem is that working meant closing a waterway through which your own survival flows. A weapon you cannot use without destroying yourself is not a weapon. It is a hostage situation. And you are one of the hostages. On May 18th, 2026, Iran announced something that had never happened before. It would begin charging ships to transit the Strait of Hormuz. The Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the PGSA, was established to administer the new regime. Its official communications channel was an X account. Vessels seeking transit were instructed to email info@pgsa.air, disclose ownership, insurance, crew manifests, and cargo, and await authorization. The reported price, $2 million per transit. JP Morgan ran the arithmetic. If Hormuz traffic returned to normal and Iran could collect at that rate, annual revenue would reach $70 to $90 billion. The global response was immediate. 5 Gulf Cooperation Council states filed a joint notification with the International Maritime Organization in London. The U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control warned that paying the fee could constitute material financial support to a sanctioned government entity, exposing any paying party to secondary sanctions. Iran's response was to repackage the toll as a fee for services. Not a charge for passage, but payment for navigational services and environmental protection. Maritime lawyers were direct. Military historian and intelligence expert Dr. Lynette Nussbacher described it as smoke and mirrors, noting that if ships must pay to pass, the distinction between a fee and a toll may be largely academic. On June 17, 2026, the United States and Iran signed the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. The strait would reopen to commercial shipping, toll-free, for 60 days. President Trump declared Hormuz would remain permanently toll-free. Iran did not agree with that framing. The PGSA remains operational. Tehran is negotiating with Oman over a fee structure for after the 60-day window. The PGSA's claimed management zone extends into the territorial waters of both the UAE and Oman, which both countries have formally rejected. The war risk premium in the London market, the morning after the MOU was signed, remained at 30 times its pre-conflict baseline. The MOU changes the operational picture, an insurance trade publication noted. It does not change the risk architecture. The London market priced the renegotiation before the ink dried. Here is the scenario math. Iran controls the northern shore and the islands. In 40 years, it collected zero in transit fees. When it closed the strait in 2026, it cut off 80% of its own oil revenue. When it attempted to charge $2 million per transit, it triggered sanctions exposure, international legal challenges, a US presidential statement, and a 60-day agreement that dissolved the fee regime before it was established. Iran is left with an X account, an ongoing negotiation with Oman, and a PGSA that no Western operator has publicly acknowledged paying. Saudi Arabia built its East-West pipeline in 1981, during the last time Iran was threatening Gulf shipping. Capacity was expanded again after Houthi drone strikes on the pipeline in 2019. In March 2026, Yanbu loadings doubled in 9 days. By late March, the pipeline was at 7 million barrels per day. Its value is not a function of how efficiently Saudi Arabia operates it. It is a function of Hormuz existing as a vulnerability. When Hormuz is stable, the pipeline idles at 2 million barrels per day. When Hormuz fails, the pipeline becomes irreplaceable. Saudi Arabia did not cause the risk. Saudi Arabia built infrastructure whose value is inverse to Hormuz stability. Lloyd's of London has been writing marine war risk policies for Gulf transit since the 1980s. In peacetime, the premiums run quietly. When tensions rise, they move within hours, before any ship is struck, before any transit is blocked. The market prices the possibility, not the event. In Q1 2026, Lloyd's assembled a $400 million consortium for Hormuz exposure. After the MOU, with the strait technically reopening, the war risk premium remained 30 times above its pre-conflict baseline. The risk architecture had not changed. 3 parties, the same strait. 3 completely different economic relationships with it. Iran controls the physical geography. In 40 years of that control, the economic value flowed to the parties who had correctly priced the risk of what Iran might do, not to Iran itself. Hormuz does not generate money because someone controls it. It generates money because no one can replace it. And the gap between controlled and irreplaceable is where the London market has been sitting quietly for 40 years. You bought the strait. You own the shore, the islands, the navigable channel. What you do not own is the risk premium. That was never for sale. After watching this, do you think Iran's service fee strategy will hold up once the 60 days expire? Or does this end the way every attempt to monetize Hormuz has ended before? Tell me below. If the asset you thought was a weapon turned out to be a product someone else was selling, there is a lot more of that coming. Subscribe, and we will keep going.